Stop that.
Welcome back to the Link Together Health podcast. This is episode 2. Georgia, welcome. What is happening? What's news?
I'm actually very excited to be back.
Oh,
Um,
why?
Not
Why are
too
you
much has
excited?
changed. Nothing really, other than camping for a few days, which is always fun. Um, and yeah, just working. It's actually warm in Victoria this week.
I
I'm
did see
struggling.
that. How's your pasty skin going? How
I got
burnt you get on the
so
weekend?
burnt. Oh my gosh. And because I was sitting with my legs crossed watching the race, I'm burnt in patches. Yeah.
Mm,
And then apparently when I cross my legs the other way, I put my hand there, so I've got a handprint as well. It's I'm just gonna keep wearing pants for a little while until it evens out.
I
But
think that's a good idea.
how are you?
Very good. Busy week. Very cruisy weekend though, which was lovely. So I actually got a heap of work done on the laptop, which was needed. But yeah, in terms of my week, it's full. Lots of coaching, lots of work. Uh, the weather hasn't been great, so I actually haven't been upset that and by not great, I mean it's like 24 degrees and a little bit overcast, but I haven't been to the beach as much as I normally am going to the beach. But
It's
that's okay.
24 and overcast here today, and that's what I'm calling hot.
Yeah. You need to stay indoors and make sure you slip, slop, slap.
I do. I really do. My legs are so red still.
George, you hit a huge milestone in terms of your career yesterday, was it?
Yeah, when you started that, I didn't know where you were going with that, but I did. Been at Life Changer for 6 years, which is wild.
Absolutely wild. Mm. Talk me through, we touched on what you do last week, but talk me through your kind of journey to getting involved with Life Changer, where it all started, where your kind of mind was at 6 years ago, if you can remember back to then. And then, yeah, how's it feel being obviously from 6 years ago, a little baby in this new organization to now an absolute superstar doing what you do now?
I can remember very clearly when I very first met my now boss. 18 years old in Maryborough, had just, or was studying a Bachelor of Criminology and absolutely hating it, fresh out of high school. I think if I had have listened to what I wanted, I would have taken a year off. But I thought the adults know best, and the adults are telling me to go to university, so I'll go to university. And yeah, I had a mentor in my life who is an absolutely incredible woman, and she had a partnership with this newly founded Life Changer at the time, and uh, they were running community-based programs in Maryborough. So parents would sign young people up to the program, and they needed someone to coordinate RSVPs and Bendigo bank banners and everything like that at the time. And so she reached out to me and said, "There's this organization. It's called Life Changer. You have an interview tomorrow." Pretty much. And so I frantically got on Google and searched everything I could find about it, and turned up to the local wrap manufacturing company the next day, which is where they were holding the workshops in a boardroom there.
Now
Um,
you mean food wraps and not like
yes,
wrappers.
yes, I
Yeah.
mean food wraps.
Yep.
In the boardroom there, and I met with our former head of programs, Wendy, and I watched Trent, who hopefully we'll have on here one day, Trent facilitate and do his thing. And immediately after watching him, I was like, that's what I want to do. And I told him that, and it fed his ego quite a bit when I told him that. But then I went from volunteer to casual to part time to full time. But I look back at it now, and I'll often say to Scott, like, I'm still a little bit shocked that he took a chance on me at that time, because I was 18 years old. I was hating my university degree, which I ended up dropping out of. And then I physically was not healthy, mentally was in a really bad place as well. But when speaking to him about it, I remember him saying that he saw a light within me. And he said it wasn't ever really a question to take a chance on me. And yeah, I've found, I think when you find people that see potential within you, um, I'm obviously case in point of like what it can do from the person that I was. I looked back yesterday at some photos of the person that I was then, and I really don't recognize her. Except when I look at her, I feel a bit sad for like that girl, but I feel like it's incredible to see, yeah, when someone sees potential and when someone takes a chance on you, all the things that can change. So now I am programs coordinator. I look after training and development. I coordinate Melbourne. I've worked overseas a few times, and get to meet young people every day and hear their stories and share my story every day, which is awesome.
Yeah, your journey is absolutely wild, George, and like you should be so proud of how far you've come in those 6 years. And yeah, I have no doubt that your your role models in that company are super stoked they did take that chance and did see that light and identified it and rolled with it as well. Because yeah, you've turned into an amazing employee, who now gets to train and hire everyone else a part of that organization as well, which is really cool.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's probably why I, and you and I speak about it quite a bit, I'm so protective about the people that I let really close. I have a lot of really cool friends, but I'm very selective about the people I let really close. And I think that's because that light within people can sometimes be quite fragile as well. And I think having those role models where I work now has shown me that like the importance of having people in that inner circle that really like encourage that light rather than try to dim it so that theirs is a little bit brighter.
And it's a perfect segue into what our main topic is. And I don't know if you did that on purpose, but like, so yeah, I think the shining light within you is often your authentic self. And that goes for all of us, I believe, to be honest. And then with our shining light, yeah, as you said, it can be dimmed, but it is so hard to be our authentic self all the time.
Yeah.
I suppose in your profession where you get to storytell and inspire and facilitate, how much of that is your authentic self, and how do you differentiate between being a role model all the time to then still needing to be your own self so you don't get lost?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think so. I predominantly work with high school aged young people. And what I've found is, funnily enough, it feels safer to be my authentic self in front of a bunch of teenagers than it can in a room full of adults. But I think the best role models that you can be are the people who are real and genuine. And that's something that it took me a while to try to understand that and grasp that, because particularly on social media, you see these like highly edited, perfect role models that can sometimes glamorize, like, even for, if you think about it in terms of like women, that can glamorize like these really insanely high standards that people are supposed to meet. But the best role models and the most authentic role models are the ones that young people connect with the most. And I think that we all connect with the most. So, there's some stories that you leave out because, you've gone through challenges or you've been through experiences that you probably don't share in a classroom. But yeah, and I think young people, I think we all have a really good radar for when someone's not being themselves. And I like to put myself back into my high school shoes when I'm sharing stories. And if I can tell that someone's not authentic and they're trying to talk to me about my well-being, there's no way I would listen to them. But it does get challenging sometimes because, yeah, like we're not perfect all the time. And so it's a balance of like the person that I show up as in that day is the right role model for someone in that room. But trying to remain authentic when, like I said, a room full of adults is more challenging to be your authentic self in, I feel. And I think that's the way you can show up in society a lot of the time. quite scared to.
How do you handle that challenge then? Like I'm
Mm.
exactly the same. Feel the exact same way. You get me in front of a bunch of sporty kids, and I'm my quirky, dweeby, nerdy self who just likes sport as well. But in front of
Mm.
peers and other adults, it can be a completely different story. So, how do you find? Do you challenge your own behavior when you know you're becoming reserved,
Yeah.
or is it something that you potentially sit in, be a little bit more reserved, but then once that's done, then you can start to get your authentic self back?
I think I go between both. So sometimes at work, I'll be more of my, I would say, professional self in the sense that, like, and I've talked a lot about this. I think I spoke about it with you, and I've spoke about it with uh, Indy, who we both know. Sometimes at work, I'll show up in more of like my masculine self because that's the high achiever, like getting things done. And I think that has been a behavior that or a habit that I picked up because it can sometimes be hard to be taken seriously as a young person um, in business or in your career. And I think when I show up as that, I don't know if it's not my authentic self because I think there is still uh, a lot of elements of me to it, but it's more like a masked authentic self.
Mm.
Behind there is like my sense of humor and my quirkiness, and but so I think there's room for both sometimes, but I definitely have moments where I'll pick myself up and it feels unnatural to be that way for too long. I think sometimes it can be really helpful in getting things done and making decisions and setting like really big goals for myself. But then sometimes I notice that feeling come up and being like, this feels unnatural. This doesn't quite feel like me. And I have to challenge my thoughts and my behaviors in those moments. And I think that's challenging and that's tough. And a lot of people probably are not in environments where they feel safe enough to challenge that. Um, but yeah, what about you? Because we have talked a lot about your many selves.
Yeah. Yes. Well, I think previously I've definitely managed. I wouldn't say it's bipolar because I'm definitely not diagnosing myself, but I think I've been very good previously and in previous lives being able to jump between different personalities. Almost like I'd go to the gym and be a different personality than what I would show up to work and be a completely different personality to what I'd be at home. And again, I think it comes down to what I felt pressure to be in those kind of environments and those situations. So at home, when living with yourself, living with Jack, living with my inner circle, which I have had in the past, I've been my own self, which I not many people know who I am, I think, that way. And that's been a really big focus point since moving up here to just be me and to lean into myself and who I want to be.
Yeah.
And I definitely still at times in a professional setting go into a completely different self. But it's slowly being more comfortable around being judged. And that fear of judgment is probably slowly being pushed away and worked on behind the scenes by myself to come across more authentic and more me, which is nice. It's a nice feeling.
Mm. Yeah. I remember because I met you at your work at the gym. Um, but the conversations that we'd had when we lived together of like the person that you are behind closed doors, by far one of my favorite people that I've ever met. That's not to say that gym version isn't. Um, because I think, and that some of the first things that I said when I joined RAD was that the trainers there, yourself and the team there, some of the most switched on and educated people in this space that I'd met, particularly coming from a small town. But so I think that self serves a purpose sometimes. But it makes me really happy to hear that more people get to see the version of you that I got to see, as unique as that is. Um, but I think it just poses like a really interesting question around like when do you or how do you recognize when that mask self or that the the work self is showing up too much.
I I've thought about this, and I actually journaled a heap about this when I was overseas, and I journaled every day about just what was going through my mind and the different adventures I was having and the exploration of my own mindset. But I find that as soon as I become super suppressed with my authentic self, and I haven't been my authentic self for a duration of time, I will almost I envision it being boxed in and me being tight in a cardboard box. And then to get out of that box, I will kick and punch and do anything and break down walls, essentially, break down anything else around me to get out and try to be my authentic self, which in reflection, I think has been quite self-destructive at times. And also not only to myself, but destructive to people around me as well.
Mm.
So now being able to identify that as soon as I start to feel boxed in, I will make sure that I release everything, come out in a really safe and like healthy way rather than just building up, building up, building out all that tension, kind of breaking me down to the point where I self destruct again. And that's, that's taken me 32 years, and I've always been like that. But it's only taken me 32 years to actually realize what was causing these once every 2 or 3 year outbursts of just destruction essentially. And that's what it was, not being me for long enough where naturally yourself just wants to eventually explode out.
Yeah. I think makes me think about all the people that you meet and how many are walking around as their authentic self and how many have that desire to be their authentic self, but fear masks it a lot of the time. For me at work, sometimes it's fear of not being taken seriously. Like for a lot of people, and in other areas of my life, it's fear of being judged and fear of not fitting in. And I think unless you're around the right people, it can be so hard to start to explore that and start to show up as your authentic self in moments and trust that I can show up as this person and it's safe here.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And it's like, I, it comes from, I think my personal boxing and paralyzing my authentic self has come from some childhood trauma, like from bullying, where I was myself and I got bullied to the point where I changed who I was. And therefore, the more positive reinforcement you get from changing yourself, the more you're going to lean into that, even though that's not who you actually are. And I goes back to what you just said in terms of how many people do you come across? Like you could meet someone who's super angry, tempered. In that split second, you make a judgment, oh, that's not a very nice person, but you don't know. And I just think back to myself, you don't know if that's them being so cramped in who they are, so fearful of being judged that they're slowly exploding and self-destructing right in that moment that you meet them.
Mm.
So therefore, you have this negative connotation and association with this person, whereas that's their worst day, worst week, worst month,
Mm.
and then they then take that back home and be like, oh, I met Georgia, I was horrible. She thinks I'm that. Do I just continue to be like that as well,
Mm.
or do I challenge? And I don't know. It's an absolute cycle of trauma and understanding and reflection everyone's going through, I suppose.
Yeah. I think it's hard as well when you can see someone's authentic self and you see moments of that, but then you see the person that they present to or present as in the world. And it can be really challenging to see both sides. I think sometimes that's where, for myself, I have to remind myself, like, to have the compassion and, like, even in past relationships, seeing someone behind closed doors and then that not being the person that you see when you're out, I think it can be really challenging as the other person in that situation to remind yourself to be compassionate and to remind yourself to have understanding and be patient. Uh, because someone has to be willing to challenge themselves to
Mm.
show up as their authentic self. You can't show up as your authentic self. Can't even realize or recognize the difference if you're not willing to hear it or you're not willing to do the work.
How, for someone close to you, say a partner or a really close friend, how have you been able to help them find their authentic self in the past? Or is it something that can you facilitate that? Have you facilitated that? Or have you just let it go and let it either self destruct in their own way, or them work themselves out of it by themselves?
I think probably both at times in the past. I think the best way that I have found to encourage someone to show up as their authentic self is to role model it and to show them that, hey, it's okay. Like, I can show up as my authentic self. It's okay. It's safe. Um, and holding space for that. But there's also been times where I've got frustrated with it, and um, but probably in those moments it's more, I can't do that for you. And yeah, I think that's as well where, when I think about even in past relationships, it's like, I can see your authentic self, so I can see glimpses of your potential and the person that you could be and how happy you could be and the life you could be living. But you're not there yet. And I think that's a whole thing around, if someone's ready and someone is there and they're wanting to explore more of their authentic self, then I think role modeling it yourself, holding space, being a safe person is incredible. But I think there's quite a few people, particularly around my age, that I meet that's like, you're not there yet on your journey, and that's also okay. And I have to be okay with that as well, which is hard.
Oh, oh, absolutely it is. I'm just thinking it's how long do you hold on to the idea of someone being their authentic self and eventually finding it, especially within a relationship, right? So like we've both had long-term relationships where I have no doubt we can see potential futures, and you see how you can kind of picture how they're going to evolve, and how you're going to grow together. But how long are you waiting for that to happen before you potentially have to let it go?
I'm probably not the best person to speak on that, because I would say 10 years is how long I
Yeah.
wait.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
um, but I think that's where I think communication is so important, and honest, open communication is so hard, but so important. Of like, in a, I always talk about it at work and with young people, it's so important when you're communicating with them to meet them where they're at. So it's not going to be any good if I then come at that conversation from a place of like, this is what I think, this is where you should be. I'm a big believer that the word should needs to evaporate. Um, but I think it's meeting them where they're at and having an honest conversation of like, hey, I see you, number one. And I think that person's really cool. And I would love to be able to see more of that person. How do we do that? Is that something you want? And how does that happen? But yeah, I think we can all fall into the trap of waiting for a little bit too long.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. I like the way you talked about that framing essentially.
Yeah.
No, I definitely agree
So
there.
important. Yeah. And
Yeah.
I think it's that, um, when you know that you're not going to be judged no matter what, you can start to explore parts of yourself that all contribute to your authentic self, but parts of yourself that, like, if there's things that have happened in your childhood that have been suppressed since childhood, um, and learn so much more about yourself. But yeah, that's like that is another reason why I think sometimes it's really important to keep your inner circle really tight. So I know all the people in my inner circle. I know that with Trent, I know that with you, I know that with my parents, um, and some of my best friends, I, no matter how I show up, they're not going to judge me. Like the amount of things that I have said to you, or the stories that I've told you, or the situations that I've told you, not once has that ever been met with judgment. And so I
I'm
think
still here. I'm still here.
it might have been internal judgment, but you never showed it. And so I think, yeah, that's huge.
Mm.
Because there's no chance, if you even detect the slightest chance that someone's going to judge you, there's no chance that your authentic self feels safe to come out if you haven't been practicing showing up as that person.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more there. Like, yeah, our conversations at home used to take absolute wild turns, but yeah, there was never any pre or face to face judgment. At least I journaled about you all the time, but
It wasn't to your room. Oh
yeah,
my God. But I remember
yeah,
some conversations though where it would be like, I would walk out to the lounge room, you'd pause Rick and Morty, or I would pause Rick and Morty and then be like, right, I have to tell you something. And you'd be like, how long? This is going to take a while. Yep, this is going to take a while, so settle in. Um, but I also think that that's a period of my life where I learnt, or one of the periods of my life where I learnt the most about myself.
mm,
And I think, we lived with Jack and Han for a little bit as well. Neither of them were ever going to judge whoever you showed up as that day, unless you were showing up as someone who was like, you know, really, and it wasn't judgment, but they'd call you out on it straight away if you're showing up as someone who's like diminishing yourself or belittling yourself. Um, that was the only time that the way that you showed up
yeah,
would be addressed.
yeah. I absolutely agree. And like in that household, those few months that we were all together, I don't think any of us like we would have ran through walls in terms of like how pumped up we made each other, how much we all explored just getting after life. And I think, yeah, it was a really powerful time, especially for myself. You've already mentioned it, but I'm sure Jack was the exact same. We all three of us and Han, all four of us went through some massive changes. And I think it stemmed from all of us finding our authentic selves and then having the courage and support from one another to go fucking get after life
Yeah.
because we all made some huge changes in those few months. And yeah, talking to all of us still, we're all soaring because of those kind of moments that we had together.
Yeah. And I think it really ties into, and I know like everyone in that household sets incredibly big goals for themselves. But I think that's something that you can't set those incredibly big goals for yourself unless you're all clear on who you are as well. And like I was watching Ned Brockman's live stream, like so much, but that's not the point. But some of the comments in there, like he's obviously set an incredible goal for himself, and to show up in that way, knowing that you will be judged, but
Mm.
being so grounded in who you are and what you want to get out of life, the judgment like pales in comparison to your motivation to live the life you want to live. Reading through the comments, there's comments in there like tearing him down and tearing this goal down, and he'd stop to go to the bathroom and they'd be like, oh, he's so weak and why is he walking when he was eating and all this stuff. But then there was a comment that I saw, it was, they'll judge you until they congratulate you. And I thought that was really powerful because your authentic self's often not rewarded until you've done something that other people think is, or that society deems as successful. So that interim phase of like the decision, well, between the decision to show up as your authentic self and then the moment that you achieve whatever that goal was, that middle ground can be really challenging and really lonely and really confronting.
No, I agree. Have you been listening to Chris Williamson, Modern Wisdom, lately?
Yes.
Yeah. So the he talks about and references the lonely chapter
Mm.
where you are in this place of leaving essentially your not your inner circle, but potentially your inner circle, but especially that. middle circle of your close friends, because you're evolving and you're growing at a rate that no one else except for yourself can kind of understand.
Mm.
And I think that that's where Brockman goes regularly with these challenges, is that he's growing and evolving to the point where no one really knows how to react to what he's doing, especially
Yeah.
because it is so, like, it doesn't have to be running 1,000 miles as your that big goal, but it's for him, and because no one else is really doing it, there is this massive gap between what we perceive as normal and to what he is perceiving as achievable. And I think that scares the shit out of a lot of people, which therefore creates that fear, which therefore I need to justify my fear by being negative towards that individual person. And you can see that in any aspect in life. I'll use an example. I was in the gym coaching the other day, a one-on-one session, and then a friend of that person walked into the gym, and my client was working really hard. It was the end of the session. They were puffing a fair bit. At the end of it, they just crouched down and took a moment and was sweating and heavy breathing. And the friend came up to that person and says, "Oh, you're paying for this. Like, as in, you are wasting your money on making you feel exhausted and tired." And I just thought, what kind of fear stems a comment like that from someone? Because this person is trying to achieve a higher purpose than where they currently are. They might have a goal of something that far exceeds what we're doing in that moment, but one of their close friends has come in and made a comment about that, and it just took me back to that those comments on Brockman's stream, the comments on his posts at the moment. There's always going to be fear instilled when people's true beliefs are being challenged, and when there's that fear of how big can someone actually go and how big that person goes without them actually doing it themselves, I suppose.
Yeah, and I think the easiest thing to do when we are in fear is to judge. And because if you don't succeed at that big goal, I feel better about myself. Like, if Ned Brockman doesn't run 1,000 miles, I feel better about myself for not running for however long. Like, I can justify it because, oh, he tried and failed, so I'm not that far behind. And I think it leads into the whole conversation around comparison, and like, it's so much stems from fear. But I think when you're able to read those comments, and when you're going after goals like that and you're able to read those comments or hear people who are trying to bring you down and recognize that that comes from a place of fear, for me, I feel bad for that person then. It doesn't stop me, but I feel bad for that person because, and I've done it as well. There's every time, and I think back to high school because I was challenging in high school. But every time I was trying to bring someone else down was not one of those times did I feel good about myself. I was always trying to bring them back down to my level because, well, if you're doing that really great thing or if you're dating that really cool guy, I feel worse about myself. But people don't call that out. And so it's fine. Like, we particularly, when you look at the comments on a TikTok live stream, it demonstrates that we live in a society that people will jump on the bandwagon of hating someone or bringing someone down so much faster than they'll get on board with their big goals and ambitions.
Sad, isn't it, to be honest?
Yeah. But I think that's the part where we have choice in who you surround yourself with. And I think that's where your power comes from. And I think that we're talking a lot about when we all live together, like that environment. Jack and Hannah are living in New Zealand now. You're up absolutely thriving in Queensland. That environment created so much growth because you weren't coming home to judgment. You weren't coming home to people being like when you and Jack were running the marathon, can you imagine if Hannah and I were like, you guys are actually like, it's a bit crazy. Like, I don't think you're going to achieve that. Like instead of coming home and being like, yeah, awesome, we'll be there. Like, we'll cheer you on. I think, your potential in life, and I'm really big. I think I've done a lot of work on trying to identify at this point in my life what my purpose is. And I think at the moment, my purpose is to leave this place better than I found it by helping people see the potential in themselves. And when you're able to help someone see the potential in themselves, that to me feeds into the courage to be your authentic self, the courage to believe in someone else's authentic self. And when you're in circles of people that do that, you see people who, like a Ned Brockman, go achieve incredible things because I guarantee not one person in his inner circle is bringing him down. They interviewed his mum and they asked her, did you ever, like, you saw him in some really like terrible ways. You saw him spewing and bleeding and being wheelchaired off. Did you ever think about telling him, like, enough's enough, call it now? She said, not once. And I think
How
that's,
amazing is that?
yeah. So he can show up as his authentic self and go after these big goals because not one person in his circle is trying to tell him that that's crazy or trying to bring them back down to their level.
And that's why I think he surrounded himself with purely an inner circle. Like there was no one on the last 12 days that was anywhere near him. Even the supporters were limited at times because I think he knew that as soon as he let anyone else in who potentially had that negative energy or that negative connotation or the feeling of doubt, that would somehow within close proximity affect him. And that's why it was so close knit because, and I respect that so much because he could have opened that up to the public for the last 12 days, but I think it would have been so much harder for him if he had done that because there would have been the naysayers, there would have been some negative stuff from that environment stem from it.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think you look at all the high achieving people, they at some point have gone against the grain and they've annoyed people and they've all got people who are still trying to bring them down. You look at some of them are more, some of them have sharper edges than others. But not one of those really high achieving people has purely like comments filled with just support. There's always someone in there, but that's how you get to those places. But I would say all of those people, maybe not all, but majority of those people are showing up as their authentic self. But it's really interesting because you ask people, and I ask people all the time, anyone who is older than me, when I'm having like a good conversation with them, one of the things I'll ask them is like, what would you tell, I'm 24, what would you tell your 24-year-old self? And 99% of people say to be myself and stop worrying about what people think and do what you want to do. The one exception to that was my dad when he said, I would have told myself to be crazier and like, do more, get in trouble. And but I suppose that still is related in a way, but everyone looks back and says, I wish I was my authentic self more.
Because in your older age, and as we talked about, you do slowly realize that the more you can just be you, the more potential you can absolutely unlock within yourself.
Yeah.
Career, relationships, life. It's massive. It's absolutely massive. And hopefully within what you're doing in life and your role that you can continue to preach that to everyone because I think it's so important. Because what you're doing, you have a huge impact on teenagers, young people, peers, older people as well. Continue to do that. And I'll just continue being myself as well.
I think you also do that for people though. I think it's hard to show, it's especially hard to show up as your authentic self when you're in an environment that makes you feel vulnerable. And for a lot of people, when it comes to exercising, when it comes to achieving, whether it's achieving their huge goals that you're helping them with or just trying to get in shape for the first time, or someone who's really, I suppose, feels really vulnerable around their body, when you're able to show up as your authentic self in that space and you encourage them to do the same and to set big goals for themselves and go after it, if you can be your authentic self in your most challenged environment, you can do it anyway. So I think you're also doing that far more than you realize.
Yeah. We're chipping away slowly.
Doing some
Big
good.
impacts. Yeah, we are doing something good. And it's all stemming from just being ourselves,
Yeah. Yep. And being around people for themselves, which is cool.
which is awesome.
Yeah.
George, what's on for the rest of the week? What do you got to look forward to?
This week, what do I have on this week? I have the presentation night for the under 17s netball team I coached this year, which I'm really excited about because all of those young women are just great people. So I'm really excited to go and be around them and see them, like, in advance who's won it as the coach. So really excited to go see them do their thing. And yeah, I'm excited for a relaxing weekend, actually. After 5 days of camping at Bathurst and watching loud, fast cars go around the track and all of that, I'm excited for just a chill, quiet weekend. What about you?
Yeah, that will be nice. The rest of the week, fair bit of work to get done. And then, yeah, also similar. I think hopefully the sun's out this weekend, which will be absolutely nice. I think a beach and a reading day. I've been chewing through a few good books and podcasts lately, so it'd be nice to go do that at the beach rather than listening to them in the car or at the desk as well. So, yeah, I'll try to get as much work done as possible now to free myself up next week, I think. Did I tell you I booked? I'm going to New Zealand. I don't know if I did tell you.
You did tell me because I asked if you were coming back that weekend, and you said
Yes, that's true.
you're in New
Yeah.
Zealand. What
Yep,
is
so that's exciting.
happening?
What's happening?
Yeah, in New Zealand.
So it's the New Zealand CrossFit Champs.
Ah,
Yes. So I'm going there for I think it's 6 days, Auckland. But sadly I can't get down to see Jack or Han. I don't think. Just from the time scheduling and everything like that. So yeah, have that to look forward to in the next, when's that? 3 weeks away or so.
yeah. And when's Melbourne High Rocks?
December 15th, so not until later in the year. So I'll get down. I think
Ah,
my first race of the season is going to be Warrnambool in end of November. So
no.
I'll get down and race down there, and then yeah, back 2 weekends after for High Rocks,
Mm-hmm.
and then I'll probably maybe come back in between then and Christmas back to Goldie, and then I'll be back down in Ocean Grove for Christmas, New Year's
Nice.
at
When
this stage.
are you? You should. Yeah, you will be staying for my birthday. Not you should. You will be.
Yeah.
Uh,
No,
I'm
I'll make the effort to,
25.
of
It's a
course.
milestone. I'm saying
Is it?
goodbye to my early 20s.
Quarter life crisis. Here we come.
If
How
I haven't been
exciting.
having a quarter life crisis for as long as you've known me,
No, I think you're reasonably functional. You're doing really well.
thanks. Thanks
No,
very
no
much.
dramas. George, it's been an absolute pleasure, like always. Have the best rest of the afternoon, and I'll chat to you soon.
Thank you all. Have a good afternoon. Bye.
Bye.